everybody. My name is John DiPIetro, and I want to welcome you to another segment of SALISBURY 500. It's a program where we talk to people that I've met during my time at Assumption College. It almost sounds like I've done my time at Assumption, but I did graduate in the regulation 4 years. So you know what? I need to tell you that Assumption's not sponsoring this, they're not sanctioning this, and they might not even know about it. But let's make other people aware of the great content you're going to hear from Jeff Taylor. If you just hit the red subscribe button down the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you will get a notification every time we do a new video as part of this SALISBURY 500 series. I'd appreciate it a great deal. And now, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our special guest, this time talking to us from an undisclosed location in the Metro DC area. Say hello to Jeff Taylor.
Morning, John. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Hey, Jeff, we were talking about the value of a liberal arts education or the non-value of a liberal arts education, because everybody's talking about liberal arts versus the trades and something practical that you can get a job with. But you've been traversing the minefields, if you will, in Washington for over 20 or 30 years with a liberal arts degree. Has it helped you? Has it hindered you? Tell us about your feelings on that.
Well, it certainly hasn't hindered me. You know, if you can go into college, if you have a strong math or science ability, that's a very good thing to go into. I did not have any of those tools. And so I had a passion for public policy, political consulting, and so obviously political science, or at Assumption College, it's called politics, which is kind of a political philosophy major. That's kind of where I focused. And when I got out of college, I had a choice of going into public policy or politics, and I did the latter. In the first maybe half of my career, I was a political consultant. I started very small as a guy who cleaned the trash cans for Senator Gordon Humphrey from New Hampshire. But then, you know, he got reelected, and then he asked me to come work for him in New Hampshire. Then he asked me to come work for him in Washington, and that's kind of how my career started in both political consulting and public policy. But Assumption gave me a very good foundation for, you know, kind of vaulting into that right out of graduation.
Yeah, right from graduation, you were able to do it. I mean, you worked on a lot of campaigns, even as a student at Assumption, and then kind of like segued right into it for a career, which is kind of amazing.
I did. I at a very early age, when I was in high school, I ran a couple of races for city council in Little Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I got my feet wet there, and then I worked for Senator Humphrey for about 2 years, but I desperately wanted to run races. I enjoyed that aspect of it, so I gave up a kind of a nice budding career in the U.S. Senate to go up to northern New York and run some fledgling congressional race. And I got the taste, and that's kind of where it happened. Then right after that, Vice President Bush was running to, in his own right, to be President of the United States in 1988. And being from New Hampshire, every 4 years, being from New Hampshire is kind of an important thing if you've got a little bit of political background. And I was young, and Bush hired maybe 5 or 6 very young guys to traverse the state of New Hampshire. And that's kind of, after that, I ran a race in Florida, Texas, and all the way up. And I was very involved in Steve Forbes' presidential race in 1996. And that very quickly, that's kind of where I jumped off of being a political consultant and on to more public policy. I went back to Capitol Hill is what I did after the 96 race.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned the New Hampshire aspect, because just a couple of months ago, my wife and I, because we're in Massachusetts, we took a run up to New Hampshire and bumped into several of the Democratic candidates, whether it be Bernie, whether it be Amy, whether it be Andrew Yang or Tom Steyer, and there was one other guy, the Buttigieg.
Sure.
You know what I mean. And the thing I noticed is all of the staffers are kids that are younger than my own kids. And would you say that the political world today, or has it always been, when you're in a national campaign, you got to be young to be able to deal with the constant motion of the campaign?
Yes, you know, our seasoned in the '88 race, our seasoned pros were guys like Lee Atwater and people who had run a lot of races. And so they go out and they hire young 21-year-old Jeff Taylors, 5 or 6 of them, to basically say, you've got Rockingham County, you've got Grafton County, you've got Coos County, and you just go and you sleep. And I slept on a floor with a guy in Concord, New Hampshire, and the guy was Andy Card, who ended up being the White House Chief of Staff. So, you know, you just do these things, and then you just learn and learn and learn.
And that's where you really kind of, it's kind of like the minor leagues, right? Where you just kind of like work your way up.
Well, I'll tell you, when Pat Robertson beat us in Iowa that year, it was not the minor leagues in New Hampshire. The entire world was focused on George Bush and whether he could win New Hampshire that year. And fortunately, we pulled it out, and he went on to become the president. But yes,
Jeff,
it's going young, going hard, and then the next stage is to do a statewide and to kind of be a consultant on 4 or 5 races, and that's the progression.
Exactly. And as Bill Humbert talked about earlier, networking is so important in the political world, is it not?
Well, it is. It's you know, after every 2 years, you're out of a job in politics. So you kind of fall back on the people you met in previous races to say, okay, where's the next race? My mentor was a man named Arthur Finkelstein, who was a pollster in New York. And, you know, the day after the election, I'd call Arthur and say, Arthur, where am I going next?
Where am I going next?
I'd put a pair of pants and a shirt and my $3,000 stereo in my Honda Civic, and off to Syracuse, New York I'd go, or Dallas, Texas, or Fort Myers, Florida. And that's your life in the early going. By the way, when you get married, that kind of ceases to be fun. My wife was like, you can't just be hopscotching around the country anymore. And again, that's about the time I headed back to Capitol Hill to get more public policy bona fides.
Great. Hey, Jeff, we want to thank you so much. I know you're heading into the Capitol area right about now, even though it's kind of shut down. I know that you have to have meetings and meet with people. And we want to thank you so much for being on this edition of Salisbury 500. And you know what? We're talking politics, but we haven't talked this political season in this conversation. Will you come back with us at another time to specifically talk about what's going on in 2020?
Well, you know me, I can talk about politics 24 hours a day. So anytime you need me, I'm there.
Maybe we'll get a few greyhounds together that have opposite sides of the opinion on this and have a lively discussion here on Salisbury 500.
That's fine.
So that is our wrap for this segment of Salisbury 500. Please take a moment to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and we've got plenty more coming. This is John DiPIetro saying so long from Salisbury 500.